Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the Creepy Cascadia podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, thank you for joining us. We hope you like what you hear. And if you're a repeat listener, thank you for listening and coming back.
Yeah, I mean, our weekly listeners got a little break there.
Yeah, they did. It feels weird. It feels like we haven't recorded in forever.
It really does, yeah. It feels like forever.
Yep.
The people who are just binging our episodes know no different.
Nope. Well, if you're new here or a repeat listener, just to let everybody know, I'm Sammy, one of your hosts. And as always, I am joined by my super sexy co-host / husband, who I love to sexually harass on the show, Adam. How are you doing today, my love?
I thought you were going to talk about what a lovely cat dad I am.
You are a lovely cat dad.
As part of today's thing. And it would only be fitting because the cats keep running in and out of our studio space.
Yeah.
Like...
When he's a little, she reminds me of one of those like flying squirrels sometimes. That's what she like acts like, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yep.
She's a ball of energy.
She really is. Well, yeah, so we are back from our little break. We have upgraded our recording area and our equipment. So we're hoping everybody can hear some improved sound quality.
Yeah, we mucked with the sound. Hopefully it's better now.
Yes.
We strive for the good stuff.
I know, because that is literally one of the things that I always judge other podcasts on is their sound quality. And ours has been driving me nuts because it's not where I want it to be.
Yeah.
So.
People, I think somebody tried to tell me that it's like the first 10 episodes of any podcast are terrible sound-wise.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, we're at like 30, almost 40.
This is episode 40.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's fine. We'll just delete the first 30 episodes of our library.
It's our timing,
We'll re-release them on our Patreon.
Yeah, improved. There are some podcasts that I've listened to that they have like re-released episodes. Like they've redone episodes from when they first started. Because, the further you go into it, the better your research gets, the better your, rapport gets with your co-host.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So we got to do a few things. We went glamping last week or the week before.
Week before.
I'm not saying camping because we stayed in a cabin, so that's definitely not camping.
Yeah. There were like 3 beds unused.
Yep. It was fun. Like our family, my side of the family, we always do like a week long, 10-day, camping trip. Yeah. But the GGs are getting older. They don't have their trailer anymore, which this started back when I was in high school. Like,
yeah.
My sophomore year.
Yeah.
And I'm coming up on 20 years out of...
I was going to say you're dating yourself.
Out of high school. Yeah. Oh, no. I know I'm dated.
See, so you keep telling me that it's a week long, but I swear it's only ever been like 4 days. Like, and I only go for like 3 days, probably max. Like,
so we used to do it. It's literally like my family would go in on a Friday and leave the following Sunday.
Yeah.
So it was like...
full week, 2 weekends, both weekends.
Yeah, it was a lot of days, which it was super fun. But people have kids now. Everybody's busy. It just has kind of evolved or devolved, I guess I should say.
Yeah, I think devolved's the right word.
Yeah, but it was really fun. We played lots of May I Rummy, which I did not win a single freaking hand. Didn't win a single game.
You weren't first out at all.
Never first out.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
You should get better at that game.
Shut up. There's no way. It's just luck. Actually, it isn't. I get too focused and, forget that I have cards because I did that many times when we were playing. I'm like, oh, my God, I could have laid down. I get so frustrated.
Yeah.
Yep.
Or the other important part is, grabbing the cards when somebody lays down and doing the may I part.
Yeah.
I know there were at least twice where, you're like, oh, shoot, I needed that card, and I wasn't paying attention that I needed that card. Yep. Yeah. So.
Imagine that, me not paying attention.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You were just focused on the conversation.
Yeah. So,
the conversation's the important part in my mind.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When time goes on and life events happen, You're not gonna be like, I wish I would have won more card games, focused on card games, you know.
Psh, speak for yourself. I might have.
Yeah.
No. But yeah, so it was, and the weather was really nice. We swam, ate a lot of food. So yeah, it was hot. It was really fun. We, other than that, we really have been just kind of working on the house. We have some things we're going to be getting ready to do at the house. So there's that. We did go watch Oppenheimer this weekend, and I told everybody at work today that they should go see it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty good. Pretty good movie.
Pretty good.
Kept you entertained.
Engaged.
Engaged is the exact word.
That's what I told everybody. I was engaged the entire time because it's a 3-hour movie.
Yeah.
But it was really good. And bonus, if you're a Florence Pugh fan, she sells her boobies in that movie twice. So
a lot.
Yeah. One of them is just like, there's a very odd scene. I'm not going to get too into it, but Adam and I both were like, well, that's weird.
Well, it's even weirder because it's like...
We aren't going to give any spoilers, but...
Okay, so my teaser is, it's his most famous line.
Is that really? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah, so go watch it. We really liked it. It was a pretty good movie. Oh, and since we've been gone, so many weird like true crime things have happened. So they arrested a suspect for the Long Island serial killer, Rex Howerman.
Yep.
Today, Lori
Yep.
Daybell, she got sentenced to life without possibility of parole, so that's great. It's so weird. All of the shots of her are just her like smiling. Like she's always got a big smile on her face, I feel like.
It's because she's a goddess.
Well, she's a fucking psycho is what she is.
Oh, yeah.
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 Mm-hmm.
I was like, I remember I asked you, I was like, we watched like a special or something about this lady, and you were like, yeah.
I think it was the Dateline episode.
I think it was the Dateline where it was more like, it was like, they originally, I feel like, made it seem like her new husband was like the instigator, like they went off and got married, and like
they both
she
are
left her kids or something.
I think.
And it wasn't the one where like people showed up to a house and were like, my kids are in there, and like the police were like, well, you have a restraining order, so you need to like it. I could be blurring the lines, but there was one where it was like,
I think it was her first husband, like the father or the aunt and uncle or the parents of one of, so because she had JJ and Tylee. JJ, I don't, if I'm remembering correctly, that was not her biological son. She like was taking care of him. It was like a sister or brother, or she was like the aunt essentially.
Yeah, because they were like, where's JJ? Where's JJ? I remember that being a thing.
Yeah. And they literally, like, the whole thing is just totally fucked. Like, both those people, I'm pretty sure that, like, he killed his first wife.
Yeah.
You know, she died under some sketch circumstances.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Long Island serial killer, the Gilgo Beach serial killer, he's on the list, you know, because that's an interesting one.
Yeah.
And it's just interesting. So we're not going to get too much into it because we have our own serial killer today. So this is going to be a 2-part episode because we do know that, you know, we've been gone for 2 weeks. This is our first week back. So that means we're going to talk a lot because that's what we do. And there's a lot of, there's quite a bit of information, and I don't want to skim over the victims. So we're going to talk about our killer today, his first victim, and then next week we're going to talk about the last 2 victims that we know of, and then his trial and sentencing.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but before we get into that, I got a question for you.
Yep, always.
Always. So, when you think of a serial killer, what is your typical serial killer in your mind?
Typical serial killer?
Yeah, like what do you picture when you think of a serial killer?
Oh man, like I gotta be honest, like the first thing that pops in my head like isn't even necessarily a serial killer. It's like Jason from Friday the 13th.
Oh, that's funny.
Hockey mask. See, it's funny because I always associate him with the big knife that's really Halloween.
My favorite horror movie, horror like franchise.
Yeah. I don't associate
Jason has the
Jason with the
machete.
machete.
The machete.
Yeah. For whatever reason, I don't associate him with the machete. Shitty.
You said
I
it
can't
funny.
say it right.
You said it funny because I said it funny. I was doing the Club Dread, and he's like, "I'm taking a bloody machete."
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's when Ramathorn,
Yep, and
Jay Chandra's
Jay Chandrasekhar. He is Ramathorn.
Yeah, he's Ramathorn.
And then
'Cause of course they're all their Super Trooper names.
oh my God, what is?
Rabbit.
No, the big guy.
Farva.
Farva. Jesus, how did I forget Farva?
I don't know.
I don't know either.
Yeah.
Farva's like a yoga instructor. He's the ones that like touches the girls and makes them orgasm because he's got all the like pleasure points or whatever.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm just taking like whatever, and he's like, are you daft? I'm taking a bloody machete. So now every time I see machete, I always want to pronounce it machete. Well, anyways, okay, so
Yeah.
Jason.
So serial killer, yeah. So I think of like big mass dude. Really, I should probably just think of some random white dude who's like in his late 20s, really, but.
Well, okay, so first thing, fun fact. Did you know that Jason is not the original killer in Friday the 13th?
Yeah, it's the mom.
It's his mom.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people know that because of Scream. Because you remember when Ghostface calls Drew Barrymore, and he's like, "Who's the serial killer? Who's the killer in Friday the 13th?" And she's like, "Jason, I've seen that goddamn movie 40 times." And he's like, "Wrong. The original is his mom."
Yeah.
So yeah. So fun fact there, if you didn't know, now you do.
Yeah.
Jason doesn't come back till the sequel. He's like the little boy. I mean, he like comes back as like the little boy at the end. He like jumps out of the lake.
Yeah.
And grabs the girl in the canoe.
Yeah.
But yeah. Well, you actually hit it straight on the head because today we're doing a Washington serial killer. He operated here in the Pacific Northwest in 1990.
Okay.
But it's not Bundy or Ridgway because, you know, Washington has a plethora of serial killers.
Okay.
But we're talking about a man named George Winfield Russell. He killed 3 women in 1990 here in Washington State. George is a bit different because he's actually a black man. He was not a middle-aged white guy, which I feel like is your typical.
That's what that's
like
what
when you think of serial killer, I think of like Bundy is like the big one that always pops into my head, right?
Right.
So this
like Dahmer.
Yeah. So this one actually had me a little bit curious about the stats because I always picture somebody like Dennis Rader as like your average guy next door, church deacon, serial killer, right?
Yeah.
So I looked at some stats on serial killers because, you know, who isn't interested in serial killer stats on a Sunday evening or early Sunday morning, am I right?
Sorry, I don't know if my yawn, I tried to keep it quiet.
That's okay, I'll do it again.
But you're probably going to yawn.
Yep.
Hold on, let me make sure my phone's on, like, silent. I think it is.
While you're doing that, I'm gonna...
Yeah, we're good, it's on silent. Did you not take your pills yet?
No. They make me sleepy, so I try to take them at like 8.
Oh, okay. Gotta do Jackson's eye drops, too.
My phone's still upstairs, so we gotta get it anyway. Go back up there anyways.
Okay.
So this case had me curious because, like, who isn't interested in serial killer facts on an early Sunday morning? Who doesn't want to know some facts? Am I right?
So you were looking at, like, statistics about, like, demographics, I would say?
Yes. In a study from 1900 to 2010, 59.2% of serial killers are white males. 35.26 were black males. Not blackmail, but like a black male.
Yeah.
And around 6% were Hispanic, Asian, or Native American.
And women?
They're really, these were, I was just looking at the males.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, this actually shocked me a little bit because I thought the number of white males would be way higher. But in looking at the data between 1930 and 1960, the percentage for white males was around 70%, and it then dropped to around 60% in 1970, and then decreasing each year until 2010, where it's tapered off at around 30%. Subsequently, the percentage of black serial killers in 2010 was just shy of 60%. So, even though the statistics have shown that, like, the serial killers, like, the black population of serial killers has actually rose, it's still not, like, it's still white males are the key demographic,
Okay.
you know. So there's some statistics to start your day. So as usual, we are going to start today by talking about the man who would become known as the Charmer / the East Side Killer / the Bellevue Killer. It's always interesting to try to figure out if there was a moment in the killer's history that could kind of point to where they would turn into such a monster. At least for me, it's fascinating, obviously, because I started a podcast about it. Because, you know, I always want to know, like, what has to snap in your mind to be able to commit such atrocious acts.
Yeah, you don't think it's a series of things? You think it's more one cataclysmic event?
Well, I think there's things that can maybe, like, pile on, but I feel like there has to be something. And that's just me thinking, like, okay, if we know what it is, then we can avoid it happening in people, you know? So it's me wanting to believe that there's a reason.
Yeah.
And we can only speculate. There's the whole nurture versus nature debate. I think it can be both. I think, you know, I don't think it's a hard or fast rule that it's one or the other. Okay, so let's get to the case. George Waterfield Russell Jr. was born April 1958, and I could not for the life of me find his actual birth date. So we just know he was born in April of 1958.
Okay.
In Florida to George Waterfield Russell Sr. and Joyce Waterfield. Joyce and George split up when George Jr. was still a baby. Most of the sources I saw said around 6 months. The timeline's a little messy on his early life. Some of the things I read said that his mom left him with his grandmother and moved him as a teen to Washington. But other articles I saw said that he moved with his mom and stepfather when he was about 6 to Seattle. And then they moved to Mercer Island, which is a suburb of Seattle, when he was in junior high school.
Okay.
But because I'm not sure, I'm mentioning both. We do know for sure that Joyce did remarry.
I feel like his name is so long, and the fact that, like, if you go through the effort of naming your kid like exactly after you, I would think that you would stick around. That's, I guess, what I was thinking. And this is not the case.
I myself am proof and evidence that that is not the case. Like I said, we do know that Joyce did remarry. I didn't really find anything about his biological father.
Okay.
It doesn't look like he was part of the picture. I don't know if he stayed in Florida when Joyce moved to Washington State. At the time, Mercer Island wasn't very diverse when it came to different races. The community consisted of mostly white, wealthy folks. So George kind of stuck out a bit as a black teen, you know,
Okay.
because there just wasn't a whole lot of other black teens or black people in that community at the time, it doesn't sound like.
Okay.
So from a young age, George seemed to struggle with staying out of trouble. He reportedly broke into people's homes at night with the owners actually at home and asleep, and he would steal whatever he could find. So clothes, jewelry, cash. He would also, there were reports, and I don't know how they know this, but some of the articles I saw said that he would, like, stand over and watch the people sleep.
Okay.
Definitely kind of creepy.
Yeah.
I saw that he was arrested 24 times for his various escapades, including taking cars of his friends. And by taking, he said he was borrowing, but he was straight up stealing his friend's shit. Like, he would steal their cars.
Yeah.
I also saw that he would watch random women as they slept when he broke into the homes. Like I said, he would watch people sleep, but
Super creeper.
he was definitely, like, giving off creeper vibes. He also got in trouble for truancy, which is, he wouldn't show up to school.
Yeah.
But rather than punish George, he was allowed to work at the police station in Mercer Island as like punishment. Now, as we have seen in a lot of serial killer cases, people that commit these crimes are very interested in police work, things like that.
Yeah.
And George was no exception. He was also found peeping in windows, and he was caught with marijuana along with pills and other controlled substances. Now, it's said that he had stolen these from his stepfather, who was a dentist.
Okay.
Yeah, which,
Like,
I mean, this was the 80s and 90s. Like, marijuana is legal in Washington now. I don't think marijuana is that big of a deal, but
oh, you
back
said he
in...
was born in the 50s. This is like 60s, 70s that he's
Well, he was born in 58.
Yeah,
Yes.
so he's a teenager in the 70s.
Yeah, so 70, sorry.
So, I mean, okay, so 70s, like, pot is definitely around, right?
I
like,
know, it's like the hippies. Everybody
right,
wants to
yeah.
smoke pot.
Yeah. We haven't quite hit the crack and cocaine 80s.
He just was a bad seed, it sounds like, from the beginning. But the bad thing about him was he was super charming. So he kept getting into all these trouble, like all this trouble. He kept doing all these things, but nothing ever stuck as far as like punishments went.
Okay.
Right? So he would get in trouble and he could talk his way out of everything.
Okay.
So
yeah, like charming, like charismatic, you're saying,
like I said,
people liked him or tended to believe him or whatever stories he was kind of peddling as an excuse.
His nickname was the Charmer. Like everybody, like that was the moniker that the Charmer serial killer, the Charmer.
Okay.
Because he was very charming and did talk himself out of a lot of trouble. Yeah. I mean, look at how much he did that he never nothing serious ever came of it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, he'd be in, for all that stuff, he'd be in juvie or he'd be in jail already.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like he really ever went in for any substantial period of time.
Yeah.
Like he would get busted and then he'd get out.
Okay. But you found records, so there are records of him doing things.
Oh, yeah.
Like he's either being arrested or something.
He was getting caught, but he never actually went to, I don't think he ever actually went to prison for all these. So all around, he was kind of a creep and a troublemaker. It looks like he dropped out of high school and he spent his days just kind of hanging around, you know?
Yeah.
He had a hard time keeping any steady work, but he was able to get by using his charm and smooth moves to make money other ways, you know? Theft and what have you.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. So, like I said, despite getting into constant trouble, he was actually able to talk his way out of a lot of the consequences. He did get his nickname the Charmer because some folks found him very likable. And he was able to manipulate other people. Now, I said some people because other people did say that there was something about him that that put them... that made them uneasy.
Uneasy, yep.
Yeah. So George was actually diagnosed with an antisocial personality disorder in 1987. And those who knew him said he had obsession with sex, which will be apparent when we talk about his crimes. But he was constantly in trouble for theft, and sounds like he bounced around from friends' homes. He couch surfed quite a bit. He just kind of seemed to slip through the cracks without ever really getting stuck, as far as his crimes are concerned, prior to him being arrested for the murders we're going to talk about.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, despite not having a steady income, George always made clubbing a priority, it sounds like. He liked to go out. He liked to go to the clubs, to the bars, which, as someone who was poor in their 20s, drinking and clubbing is expensive. It's not cheap to go out. And I'm not cute enough to, be the type of person that's like, hey, let's go out. I'll get us all free drinks. I'd have to, make sure my other friends that were cute when we went out
would get you drinks.
Would get free drinks, and I could just have, mooch off of their good looks and charm. And I'm definitely not charming enough either. Funny, but...
Yeah, I'm sorry, but clubbing plus never really holding a job just screams drug dealer to me.
Right?
Like...
I'm not sure. it wouldn't surprise me if he was dealing drugs, but I didn't explicitly find any, or I didn't find anything that explicitly said he was dealing drugs. So yeah, that's very much kind of what I envisioned too.
Yeah. So I guess the clubs is where he started meeting the ladies.
Mm-hmm. So I'm assuming that he made just enough to party and kind of juggled any real responsibilities, like talked his way out of a phone bill or just things like that. It was the 90s, so you didn't have like a cell phone bill unless you had one of those old ass car phones or the Nokias.
Again, he's like 30 in the 90s, I feel like.
Well, that's what I'm saying. In the 90s, cell phones weren't a thing.
Oh, 100%.
Is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yes. So it sounds like he kind of just mooched off of one friend until he wore out his welcome and the charm wore off, and then he would just move on to the next friend.
Okay.
I think that we can agree that there had been some troubling signs prior to him committing his first murder. He was obsessed with sex. He knew how to talk his way out of trouble. He had no respect for the law since he always seemed to avoid any serious repercussions for his crimes and actions.
Sorry, I think that's where you were going before the pitiful cries was his obsession with sex.
Mm-hmm.
And some highlight of that, but okay.
Yeah, so he was like obsessed with sex. He talked about it constantly. He just obsessed over it. Like he just was obsessed, like sex. Everybody, I think it sounds like from everybody that knew him knew how he felt about the act of sexual intercourse.
Was he like a sex addict? Was he getting it, or was he like, it's up on a pedestal? It's
Put
like
the pussy on a pedestal.
Yeah, exactly, right.
I think that he did date. I think that he probably, I'm assuming he did. I didn't see anything that said that he was like an incel or anything. So,
yeah.
Now I did see this one website that gave a timeline. I'm not 100% sure how valid that timeline was, but one of the more troubling things that I saw on there was when he was like 25 or in his 20s.
Yeah.
He had what they described as a consensual relationship with a 14-year-old. And I'm like, okay, well, if you're 14, that's not consensual. That's not even the age of consent. I'm pretty sure the age of consent in Washington's like 16 or 15.
Yeah.
So I'm not 100% sure on that, but that was one thing that I did see. So I'm like, okay, was he attracted to like younger women because they were more easily manipulated, which it sounds like he knew how to manipulate people. So that would track if that were the case.
Right.
But I wasn't able to confirm that, but it was something that I did see that kind of like, ugh, gross.
Yeah. I had a slightly funny thought about when you were saying like you talked about sex all the time or whatever.
Like me.
No. My thought was like, watch him be like the stereotypical gay man in a closet, like, oh, I love boobs, It's
like holding a bag of sand.
Yep. I get that pussy all the time, you know what I mean? Like I'm trying to think of like Oscar, right? Was it like the final episode of The Office where like
he's like, I have to remember how I acted before I came out.
Yeah. Exactly.
And he was like, what's up?
That's right. He did that. He wasn't like, oh, boobs, right?
No, I don't think that was the case. I think he was honestly like, he had that antisocial personality disorder. Like, I think that he just was a scumbag.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it definitely doesn't sound like he's a great person or a good person in any respects at this point.
So I think because, and this is just my opinion, but because of his ability to get away with his crimes, he escalated, like to keep it exciting almost, it felt like to me. So on June 22nd, 1990, George would find his first victim, a young woman named Mary Ann Polreich. She was born December 28th, 1962, and at the time of her death, she was only 27 years old. And she was a student at Bellevue Community College, as well as Seattle Pacific University. She had an associate business degree and attended on studying computer sciences at SPU, which, 90s going into computer sciences?
Right.
Genius.
Yeah. It's a little bit of a business degree.
Mm-hmm.
Sound like she had a bright future.
Yep. She was a math whiz and she loved to dance, which was why she was at Papagayo's Cantina on the night of June 22nd, which was a bar and restaurant near over Lake Washington.
Let me guess. This is where she met.
The twat. Twat. Yep. So Mary Ann was a frequent patron of the cantina and the restaurant that previously occupied the space. It sounds like the cantina had only been open for about a month or so. I'm assuming that this was her like happening hotspot. You know, like when you're in your 20s and you go out and you go to dance or have a drink, there's that one spot you always go to. It sounds like this was her spot.
Okay.
You know, and she loved to dance. Unfortunately, one of her hotspots would become the scene of her demise. So it would be here that she would have the misfortune, to put it lightly, of meeting George Russell. Police suspect that Mary Ann may have actually left with George because her car and her purse, along with a sweater, were left behind at the restaurant. Now,
like snatched her.
Well, that's what I thought, but then I also saw additional articles that said it was left at the coat check.
Okay.
So, you know, she...
If it's her spot, she knows them and they're going to watch out for her. And
Exactly. Or if it's like, you know, you've had a couple and you're like, oh, I'm going to come right back. Like, they think that she actually left on her own volition. Like, nobody saw her being dragged out of the restaurant.
They're going out to their car to fuck.
Well, I'm not saying that exactly, but I don't know for sure if her leaving her purse meant she had her wits about her when she left, or if, you know, maybe George, like, rushed her out of the restaurant. It's easy to kind of, like, get carried away in the moment when you're young and have had a couple drinks. And I am in no way victim shaming her at all. I actually saw this really great article that I want to bring up. It's tagged in our sources, but it was a article written, and the writer, and I can't remember her name right now, she wrote for the Seattle Times. She basically broke down a previous article about Mary Ann and what had happened. Okay. And she's like, so here's what they said. Her friend had told her, like, I told Mary Ann not to go out dancing with strangers. You know, all these, like, she enjoyed going out, essentially, like, almost
making it seem her look like a slut or something, or
essentially, yeah. And then she said, so if I were to write this, here's what I would write. And that's where I got the information about her going to school, like, and, you know, her being a math whiz. Like, I think it was her brother that said she was, like, exceptionally gifted at math. Yeah. So it's really sad to even read now. Like, I commend that woman for writing that article, because it's not that, I mean,
it is less victim shaming, it sounds like.
It's such a different world for women, even now. Yeah. Like, when women go out, you don't leave your drink. You go out in groups. You never walk or leave a drink unattended. Yep. You know, you don't wear anything that could be perceived as promiscuous, because then if you get raped or abducted, you were asking for it. Yeah. That shit still goes on today. And it's super terrible. It's like, hey, why don't we address the actual problem of, let's teach people not to be fucking terrible and murder and rape women because they cannot control their own fucking impulses. Sorry, went off on a little tangent there, but I read that article and I was like, this is such bullshit. Like, that, I see why that woman wrote in the article, because it's like, you know. So she mentioned in the article another case where, like, a woman had been jogging and they described what she had been wearing. So obviously, you know, she was modestly dressed, so she wasn't asking for it. And it's like, women can't exist without somebody perceiving them as asking for it. And it just makes me so mad. P.S. Speaking of that, another side note, we got to go watch Barbie. The girls at work went and watched it, and they said it was really good. Some of it. I think Liliana, one of my coworkers, she's pretty woke and awesome, you know? So she, like, really, really enjoyed it. But I want to watch it. Out. Yeah.
Wednesday or Thursday, if you want to even do a date night this week.
Yeah. But anyway, so she was a young woman, you know, going to college, she liked to dance, like, you're young, and when you have the energy to go dance, you should. Because
Right.
you don't have it when you turn 30. Unless you're really drunk, like me. Not me right now. When I get really drunk, I like to dance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Get a little boogie.
Get a little buggy.
A little boogie woogie.
Have you seen that stupid Vine where it's like a dad? I follow him on TikTok. It's like classic Vines or whatever.
Okay.
And it's like a dad that asks this little girl, he's like, hey, how do you make a tissue dance? And she's like, how? And he's like, you put a little boogie in it. And she like smacks his arm and she's like, it's like so fucking funny.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've seen the meme or the girl like laughing, like smacking down. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep.
Sorry for all the tangents. We're getting into the really terrible parts. So like I said, so she left her purse, her car, her sweater were left there. So they do think that she left on her own volition, but we don't exactly know the circumstances, or I wasn't able to find the circumstances of her actual leaving the restaurant lounge. But we sadly know that her last hours alive were extremely brutal and heinous. So trigger warning, we're going to talk about sexual assault and extreme violence. She did not have an easy death by any means. So police believe Marianne was killed between 2:30 and 5:20 a.m. in the early morning hours of June 23rd, 1990. Her cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head, but the violence inflicted on her body didn't stop there. Her autopsy showed severe trauma to her liver and spine, both the result of a brutal beating. She was also choked and sexually assaulted. I'm 99% sure she was sexually assaulted while she was still alive, but we do know that she was also sexually assaulted after she died.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ew.
Yeah. She was dumped behind a Black Angus and McDonald's, and her nude body was posed, clearly wanting to create a shocking scene. Her legs were crossed, and in her hand she held a Douglas fir pine cone. And according to the Murderpedia article, which I've linked in our notes, she also had a Frito-Lay's dip container placed over her right eye. So it was clear that the killer wanted to show how little he cared about his victims, and it was a final humiliation of her, like one more way to degrade Marianne.
Yeah.
So her body was actually discovered by, I think it was a McDonald's worker who was taking the trash out before they opened up. Yeah. So that was where they could kind of, they could guesstimate like when her body had been placed there. Yeah. So at like 3:15, one of the restaurants was taking out their trash and they didn't notice her. And you would have noticed her because she was like on full display, sadly, because he was a fucking piece of shit.
Yeah.
That literally just like, he wanted people to see what he had done.
Yeah.
So they know like she wasn't there at 3:15, so they estimate, like I said, 2:30 to 5:20 was when she was killed.
Yeah.
And I think it was around 5:30 or 6 that this employee that was taking out the trash found her. So the discovery of Marianne's body rocked the community. Now remember, this wasn't a affluent area. Horrible crimes like this were pretty few and far between. So police confirmed Marianne's identity through dental records, and they started to put together a timeline of her last few hours. They interviewed staff at the restaurant, friends, family, all the people, coworkers, but no one at the restaurant really remembers who she left with. And investigators weren't sure that the original intent had been murder. They thought maybe their killer had lost control and unleashed some long-held rage, and were worried that, like a shark, he had now had a taste for blood, because they immediately were worried that this was not an isolated incident because of the brutality and the posing of the body. Like, that does not speak somebody that's like a one and done. Like, if you pose somebody like that, he obviously got off on the thought of somebody finding her like that, you know?
Yeah.
So while we know now that George was responsible for this horrific murder, police at the time were stumped. They started to put together a profile of their killer, and they worried that this might not be an isolated incident, like I said. The murder didn't appear to have been premeditated, But the time and thought into posing her body afterwards showed that he wanted his actions to be seen. He wanted that shock factor. And that is where we're going to end this week's episode because we still have 2 more victims to cover. And like I said, I don't want to rush talking about them. But we're also going to we're going to talk about George's capture and the trial in the next week's episode. But before we go, babe, what are your thoughts so far?
Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of tough, right? Like it's in the vein of like not seeing race.
Yeah.
Like if you didn't know this guy was black and you heard like charismatic but socially awkward, narcissistic type of a thing, like
I think he could turn on the charm when he wanted to.
Yeah. So would you think of like does that remind you of maybe like Bundy, who I thought people seemed charmed by?
It did, and it sounds like, so I saw in a couple places that George was actually like, he idolized Bundy, and he thought that he was a really like cool person.
Right, because when was Bundy captured?
So Bundy was arrested 1978. But I don't
Okay.
know if that was the first time or the second time.
Okay.
75 was when he was first caught, and then he was also, when he had escaped in Florida, he was caught in 78. But that was after he murdered those girls in the dormitory or sorority. I can't remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you're talking about his 70s, his
late 80s.
20.
Or late
He's
70s.
he's about 20, so it's like, so for George, it's like late teens, early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Very, what do I want to say, formidable,
Yeah.
like, personality shaping, you know, like, you're an adult, like, what do you want to do with your life?
Right.
Type of thing.
Well, and so we kind of, because it would take forever to go over all of his crimes.
Yeah.
We glossed over, like, we mentioned, he was constantly in trouble, it sounds like, but it sounds like there were also troubling comments that he would, like, make to friends and family, like, idolizing Bundy. It sounds like violence wasn't specifically limited to his later years. Like, it sounds like he maybe was violent as a kid, but not to the extent he was now, like, knocking around little kids or whatever, it sounds like the warning signs were definitely there. Like there was warning signs that he had the potential to be something, which he sadly became.
Yeah.
And we do know that mental illness, even now, is not widely, I don't want to say widely accepted, because I feel like it's getting better, but even in 87, when he was diagnosed with that antisocial personality disorder, I feel like that, if I'm remembering correctly, that's kind of just the blanket diagnosis they gave to people that had something wrong, but there wasn't a specific. I'm sure now it would be more definable,
Yeah.
But at the time, I think it was a blanket diagnosis for, there's obviously something going on with this person.
Yeah.
But
it's not full like schizophrenic. It's not full narcissist or something like that.
But but there's definitely something off.
Something.
I didn't see anything that said he was undergoing any type of psychiatric treatment for his condition. Now, that's not to say he wasn't. I'm just saying that I didn't see anything talking about it. Knowing him, I don't even know if it would have mattered if he was like seeing a psychiatrist, because he'd probably just be the type to tell them what they want to hear, or know how to work the system, so he didn't have to do.
Yeah.
And again, that's just me speculating, but
I want to say that probably, I think the most unsettling part of all this, right, is the like sneaking into people's homes. So like in my mind, affluent neighborhoods tend to, like I grew up in a place that didn't lock your doors.
Yeah. And this was like the 70s and 80s that
70s and 80s, like a lot of people still weren't like even in certain neighborhoods weren't even locking their doors, right? So like it's kind of like, I feel like his adolescence taught him that like it's easy to do these terrible things. And then when you don't suffer any like
major consequences,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like you just learn that you can.
It paves the way for like increasingly bad behavior.
Yes, absolutely.
Sorry to cut you off.
That's fine.
But it's, yeah, I totally 100% agree because it doesn't sound like anything ever super substantial happened to him regarding these. Like, there was a friend that he stole like a really expensive car and he told the police like, oh no, I'm just borrowing it for my friend. And the friend's like, fuck no, he's not. Like, he stole my fucking car.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awful.
Cops are like, well, you got your car back, right?
Yeah, essentially, I don't know if it's like, so like I said, his stepfather was a dentist. I don't know if maybe his stepfather was a little bit more like influential, kind of. I didn't see anything like that maybe he like got him out of trouble or whatever. Are you thinking of Steve Martin's dentist and horror Little Shop of Horrors?
I'm sorry, I don't view Dennis as very influential in the cop community.
Well, no, like in the community itself, like dentist, like you're essentially a doctor, like you make very good money. Now, again, this was in an area that was pretty affluent already.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. I did see something like at one point, again, going back to his childhood, there's a lot of conflicting information that I found. At one point they sent George, like his mom and his stepdad sent him off to live with a friend of theirs, and he like made sexual advances towards the wife of their friend. And another thing said that he actually ended up living with his stepdad, and his mom and the stepdad got divorced. But it wasn't totally clear because it also sounds like maybe they had a child together and that child was kind of doted on while George was kind of,
yeah,
the redheaded stepchild, for lack of a better word.
Child from a previous relationship, right?
Yeah. So yeah, next week we're going to talk about his next two victims, like I said. So as always, thank you guys for listening, and don't forget to subscribe and download our show on whatever platform you're listening to, as well as leaving us a rating or review. A 5-star rating would be fantastic. Good reviews, love those, on whatever platform you're listening to. So all of these help us become more visible to more people. We show up in more searches, yada, yada, yada. It helps us grow the show. Also, please help us out by sharing us with your friends, family, and social media, all the things. We are on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Also, check out our website, which is just creepycascadiapod.com, or you can shoot us an email to admin@creepycascadiapod.com. If you have your own story of a true crime incident, ghost story, if you've seen Sasquatch, please, 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 please send it in. I want to see Bigfoot so bad. But again, Harry Henderson Bigfoot, not like ultimate apex predator Bigfoot.
Yeah.
In my mind, that's what he is.
Yeah.
He's like Harry and the Hendersons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd like to also add, if you're one of the people that commented about like sound quality, that type of stuff, like give us feedback on this. Yeah.
Yes.
A, thank you. And then B, like give us feedback on this episode. Like did we fix the issue? Do we need to keep digging into it?
Yeah. We're going to continually try to work and improve our stuff because, like I said, that's what I judge podcasts on. Like, bad sound makes me just want to, like, turn it off. So we don't want that because, you guys, I want to be a podcaster. So, but we will be back next week with part 2 of our coverage on the George Russell, aka the Charmer serial killer that was here in Washington. But we hope everybody is having a great week. Stay safe, and we will see you guys back next week. Bye.
Bye.